So welcome back, everyone, for the evening session of the Civil Affairs Association 2025 Roundtable. So good evening to most of the folks and good morning to the Paycom folks as they're starting to start their Wednesday. The next piece up, we're going to talk about the issue paper launch for 2025 and a few other CA administrative pieces. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Colonel Holshek. Or actually, am I turning it over to General Goddard? I believe I'm turning it over to you. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, so let's bring up the slides and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we'll go ahead and talk about the successful year that we had again with the Publications Committee. Joining me today is Christopher Holchek and Dennis Cahill, colonels each, one each. So we're going to talk first about the issue papers, which, as most of you know, or all of you should know, is the contest that we have every fall to solicit papers, judge them, and then we ultimately publish them in a manual that's the top 5 papers and sometimes 1 or 2 extra things, so that that copy can go out and be distributed to key leaders and influence and show the thought leadership in the civil affairs community. We actually printed 450 copies this year, which is almost double our normal amount because we're going to try to send more out to the command so that if you go to a 2, 3, 4-star headquarters and sit in the waiting room, you might see this manual sitting there and thumb through it. We also want to give one to the graduates of the CA courses so that they have something to go forward with and hopefully inspire them to be authors of these same papers one day. In addition to the papers, which we're most famous for, we have quite a few other successful enterprises going along, such as the Eunomia Journal, the 1CA podcast, and I'd like to mention that it is nominated for a Peabody Award, and that is extremely prestigious, and a lot of credit to Major Jack Gaines on that one, and his whole team works on that podcast. And then we have the Publications Advisory Board. We would like to pump this up some more and get more requests for help on how you can publish your own professional paper in parameters, small wars, a number, as you can see down there, of the professional publications that are out there, again, demonstrating thought leadership within the civil affairs community. All right, next slide. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dennis Cahill, who's going to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here with this.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you, Dennis.
Okay, great. Well, as Chris said in the earlier session this morning, we were tasked by General Van Roosen to put together a narrative strategy for civil affairs that helps us, all of us in the community, tell our story. And we did produce that and that narrative strategy. And it has several components to it. You can see in the second bullet there, it's got ends, ways, and means. Within the ends, we tried to educate target audiences on what civil affairs is and does. We try to gain advocacy from various policy makers and others who can help us promote and advance the civil affairs capability in DoD. And then the motivation, again, is to basically generate enthusiasm and interest, and that all comes from the various ways and means listed here. I'm not going to go into each bullet, but each of these elements of the ways and means is fully addressed in the narrative strategy paper that I'll talk about in in a moment. But the main piece of the paper itself is the framework based on the questions listed here. And again, Chris mentioned those questions earlier today. And the deliverables include the 3 items at the bottom, the narrative strategy paper itself, the briefing, and the handout. And if you had access to this particular slide, those blue lines indicate links to those documents, but they're all in the Civil Affairs Association website. If I can get back to just the education piece, that's kind of what that was a challenge that General Carter was describing this morning. How do we educate, or can she educate her partners, the general officers, the senior leaders that she interacts with on a daily basis, and in particular the Army? She was saying how the Army looks at civil affairs as primarily a phase 4 force, whereas we all know we are applicable, civil affairs is applicable across all the 5 phases, or we're now calling the competition continuum. And so we believe that by reading this paper and using the slides and the handout that we made available, we can help everyone here and across the force to help tell our story. So Chris, I'm going to let you take the next one because I think you've got the majority of the next couple of slides. Over.
Okay, I'll let General Goddard first, and if he wants to make an intro on this, or it's up to him. It's his call.
Yeah, I'm just let's surmise this, that we're not getting people to submit enough papers. Now, there's a variety of reasons likely behind this, but the point being that, as you can see there, we're getting 5 to 9 submissions, but we have to pick the top 5. So it's we can't provide a qualitative analysis if we have to have the minimum 5 papers required for publication. And so, there's a few things that are behind this. We're going to try some different things because we just can't keep doing the same things we've been doing. That's the definition of stupidity. Yeah. Anyway, Chris, why don't you go ahead and give your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and notice the dates. Notice, that it's been basically since the pandemic. Since we got, out of the pandemic, it really had. We thought it would uptick, but there have been a couple of volumes where we've only had really only 5 submissions. So that creates a really great editorial challenge, because then we're not necessarily picking the best papers, but what we're trying to do is, as we like to say, make a leather purse out of a sow's ear, because we've got what we've got to work with. One of the things, by the way, and on the last bullet, that really has caught our attention is how the people who have submitted the papers are not either reading the calls for paper, or they're not reading the paper guidelines because they submit them with all kinds of well, they're not in accordance with the way we would like to have the paper. So again, that creates massive amount of work. So we have kind of 2 problems there. But if we get enough papers, I think then we can kind of weed out the ones that, as good as they may be, that don't follow that. As again, General Goddard explained, we have some theories as to why that is the case. One observation, or one point of contention, is that the topics have been sort of too narrowly focused. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that, because one of the things we certainly have done is taken papers that, if, for example, you just want to write something about civil knowledge integration, or civil integration management, or something like that, or tactical civil affairs or something, we don't have a problem with that, as long as you walk the paper back somehow with the main theme, which only requires a couple of sentences in the opening and closing paragraphs. So we've been pretty flexible that way. But point is taken. We need to kind of figure out a different way to approach this. So we're looking basically at broadening the approach. And I'll just show the next slide. So this has been our response since that discussion last November at the board of directors meeting. We tried, by the way, to use more social media. I personally, in the weeks between about the beginning of June and when the papers are due in early September, about every week, I post something on the association Facebook and LinkedIn pages to just kind of nudge and remind and so on. But unfortunately, there haven't been that many reposts. And that is so my shout out to everybody is if you do happen to see something this summer on the issue papers and you see it in your LinkedIn or your Facebook feed, please do us a favor and just repost it for us or like it or do something so that the algorithms can start working for us and get the word out. That would really be helpful. But we have also observed that simply not enough people within the civil affairs organizations, commands, and institutions are not getting the word. So we've got a bit of an approach there as well. So the first thing we did to address it is we upped the ante. The first prize for the best paper has been $1,000, and then 500 for second prize and 250 for third prize. We've basically, well, we've increased that, as you can see, to $2,500 for cash award for the paper. By the way, it's not per author, it's per paper. So if you have multiple authors, you have to split the check. Then what we have done, and this is the consultation that took place between myself, General Goddard, and Colonel Cahill, is we wanted to broaden the theme. So what we're looking at this year is, which I think is rather appropriate, is redefining civil affairs, which kind of melds with the telling the civil affairs story initiative. And we hope that the writers consider that as a source, at least to kind of use the framework that we have in explaining civil affairs. But this year, it seems we've thought could be redefining civil affairs, and we can have some discussion on that here in a little while. So let me go to the next slide. General Goddard, do you want to make any comments
Sure.
to this, or?
So what we, again, back with let's try something a little different, is to get the various proponents and commands more involved in this, and hopefully they feel a little bit more ownership, and therefore will push on their organizations to get their young enlisted and officers to write in on these subjects. But keeping in mind, though, we do have a timeline for this. So we're going to send that theme out and ask each of those that you see there to comment or come back with what their thoughts are on the topic for the papers. Again, keeping it very broad, and but we'll, at least hopefully they feel that they have input and ownership so that this covers the entire community, which historically has been a little bit of a problem here. So you can see redefining civil affairs. It's a theme, but it's a very broad theme. There's a lot of thoughts, pretty much any thought you can think of, I think, fits under there. As you can see, we talked about LISCO, we talked about irregular warfare, stabilization, all these very things would certainly fit within redefining civil affairs. And given the current climate out there, and especially with the changes in the US government, I think this is going to get a lot of attention because we know that there's got to be, we hopefully would think, a lot of thoughts out there amongst the membership of the Civil Affairs Association. So we're going to see how this goes.
Yeah, and for you guys in use of KPOC, if you were listening to what the CG, her challenge that she identified on, how can we better explain the efficacy and value added of civil affairs during phases 2 and 3, and basically the LISCO phases. There's obviously some papers there. There are some really good paper opportunities to basically answer her question, and obviously that helps use of KPOC in particular, because they're the primary or sole force capable along with the Marine CA groups to support LISCO. But even the Marines are basically slated to do littoral warfare. So it's really a great opportunity for KPOC to help redefine the role of civil affairs in such a way that your audience, which would be a corps commander, a division commander, a service component commander, and of course a GCC commander, to better understand how they can leverage and integrate civil affairs for those phases. So that's just an example of the types of papers that, for example, the CG of use of KPOC when you repost the paper, the call for paper in your own communications platforms, sort of command channels, if you will, that additional guidance could be provided by the institution or command in question to say, hey, we're looking for papers on this, this, and this. And that's kind of the approach that we're taking, because we want the civil affairs papers to be more of a source and an asset for this kind of discussion to take place on a more academic level that can feed conceptual and doctrinal and other and force development and writ large. So we want this to be more of a tool for those organizations, those commands, those proponents, and so on. So we also need to update the issue paper guidelines in time for this next posting of the call for papers to reflect some of the changes that General Goddard had just mentioned, and to just simply update them because they haven't been updated since 2021. So let's see. I think we've got this.
Good.
So, sir, over to you. Do you want to lead the discussion, entertain any questions?
Sure. Well, I've been seeing chat come up with a few questions such as how about AI? I think that's a perfect topic, right? How does civil affairs now operate in an AI-centric environment? So again, it sounds like the creative juices are already flowing on this, but what are your questions out there about the little bit different direction we're going to try here? How do people feel about that?
Hey, Dennis, Kale, we see your hand. I don't know if you had a comment or
Yeah. No, I was going to say that, again, to go back to General Carter's challenge earlier today about how do we talk about civil affairs or describe civil affairs in terms of lethality. And of course, General Irizarry had a great picture that helped explain that. So I think something along those lines, redefining civil affairs in terms of lethality might be a good paper that someone might want to consider. Over.
And a paper on AI would be great, and would certainly fit in this, because what you could talk about, in fact, are the implications for AI, how that's going to impact how civil affairs is leveraged by the commands, and what value is added that that CA can bring if they had AI, and how they would use AI.
Yeah, I saw something in chat about basically the way I interpreted it was, can they reach out and talk to us about the theme or the topic of their paper? Absolutely. Any member of the publications committee can advise you. Please, we encourage that, in fact. So get with us, and if you want to figure out how civil affairs works in a new environment, a new doctrine, whatever it is, we're here to develop your idea, to help you out as senior members of the community. So we're all available.
And the email that you would send that to is papers@civilaffairsasoc.org. Papers@civilaffairsasoc, as in association.org. And they will come to General Goddard and the Publications Committee, and we can field those questions on the papers or any suggestions that you may have. We're going to basically, unless there's a great deal of resistance or a great deal of protest out there, we're going to kind of float this idea and send it to the major civil affairs institutions and commands and proponents and so on, so that they can start hacking and commenting on it, because the goal is to get that out by the end of May so that people have plenty of time to start working on their papers over the summer.
Sir, I see Zach Schmook has a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think it's a great idea, the broader focus. One of the things that you might want to consider to encourage more folks to turn in writing, if you wanted to set aside one of the chosen papers for the top company grade or the top NCO written paper, to kind of encourage that buy-in from the beginning and build that group out a little bit further. Just an option, but I think the broader focuses will, because I know the teaming was a lot of great articles came from that, but I know as somebody who thought about writing for that, I didn't really have anything to say on that topic. Whereas this is a much broader topic that I think will engender more input from a wider range of others.
Sure, and that can be a command initiative as well as an association initiative. There's no reason why the commands can't, feature papers. By the way, just for everybody's edification, let me see if I can get back up to the very first slide. When we talked about all these different platforms, it's in fact in the paper guidelines, in that if your paper for whatever reason doesn't make the cut, it doesn't mean that your work is all for naught, because the alternatives that you do have is to go to the Eunomia Journal, look at the submission requirements there. Obviously, the length of the papers is about 10 pages, plus or minus about a page of notes or something like that. We're a little flexible there. But you could write a shorter version of it and submit it into the Eunomia Journal. We've had that happen. When we did get 15 or 20 papers, we had some really good papers that for whatever reason just didn't make the cut. But we strongly advised to the authors to, hey, why don't you publish this in the Eunomia Journal, because you have something very valid to point out here. The same idea with the Publication Advisory Board. And the whole purpose of the Publication Advisory Board is we have some civil affairs scholars. If you go on that part of the website, you'll see that we have some civil affairs scholars who were there along with General Goddard to help CA professionals, even if they're writing, they're working on a master's degree, or they're working on a CGSC paper or something like that, and they need help on putting it together. That's one area that we wanted to provide. But the other is the necessity, and we've recognized this for a long time, the necessity of mainstreaming the discussion of civil affairs in the discussion of the Army and the Marines and the Joint Force and so on. And we don't see very many things on civil affairs in parameters or Joint Forces Quarterly or Army Magazine or anything like that. In fact, they've only appeared because folks like myself and Dennis and so on have written them. So we're really looking for people to step up and who have great ideas and can communicate to those audiences about civil affairs, to really encourage them to get published. And we can certainly help out with that process.
My back is really, something must have happened.
Somebody's speaking, but I can't hear.
Hot mic.
Hey, Mike Cleary, do you have a question or is it a hot mic?
No, it's just something.
All right, well, maybe let's
get him
move
muted.
on then and see.
I'm not talking
Any
about that. I'm
last
talking about in
questions?
general, so this isn't every day. I
Mike
think it's
Cleary, you got a
hurricane.
hot
I
mic.
think something happened.
Hey, can you mute that? Anyone?
I'm working on it.
Anyway, but again, for everybody on the net here, all of us are available for follow-up regarding this. And like we said, personal advisement. If you want to say, hey, I think I want to write a paper on civil affairs and Martians, hey, you know what? We'll consider it. Just get with us. We do want to make this a broad topic. We are hoping that's going to solicit a lot more ideas. And certainly we would hope, given the dynamic environment right now, that we've got a lot of ideas out there because there's a lot of things happening.
Lots to
So
talk
let's
about.
let's get those pens to paper or use AI to write your paper. No, I'm just kidding on that last part. But anyway, we're available all the time, every day. So just get the word out, reach out, touch us, and we hope to have another really good papers season the latter half of this year.
And to facilitate even further discussion, I'm going to turn this over to Dennis Cahill to talk about a brand spanking new initiative, a civil affairs team room blog, for us to have these sort of outside the wire discussions on civil affairs, where you can talk in a very collegial and an open way, so that we can create this sort of intellectual capitalization. Over to you, Dennis.
All right, Chris, thanks. And as Chris said, I was asked to talk about this. This is a personal project of mine that started a few years ago during COVID, when we were sitting around the kitchen table for some reason talking about blogs, and my son turned to me and said, you should write a blog about civil affairs. And I'm thinking, how can I write what can I talk about with civil affairs? And I kind of thought about it for a while. I looked up a few places like LinkedIn and Reddit, and found a few people asking questions about civil affairs, and the answers that were provided were either very curt or just not adequate in my opinion. So I started thinking about it, and eventually came up with this blog format, a question and answer, where a question is posed, and then I or another member of the our team, and right now I have about 30 folks among our community who expressed interest in participating as CA team room members to respond to questions. But that's what it is. It was launched last week. As I said, it's a personal blog. It was launched 2 weeks ago. And, it's a place, as it says here, to promote understanding, because I have, again, a lot of questions about from people who are looking to get into the branch, wondering what it is, or people in the branch who just would like to have a discussion with someone more seasoned about how he or she did, met a challenge of something like that in their career or experience. And so the fourth bullet there has a couple of sample questions of the kinds of things we're going to talk about. And as I said, the first post went out 2 weeks ago. The next one is supposed to go out this current Thursday. And the second post is basically going to explain a little bit more about what the Civil Affairs Team Room is and what to expect when you look into it. But one main thing we've got to remember is we all have to abide by some OPSEC rules. I was reminded when I was told I had to, like the papers I've written as a member of the SOC staff, I have to send my writings through the public affairs officer. In USASOC, we also have the G2 and the OPSEC rep review everything before it gets released. So we have to abide by those rules. And there's the standard disclosure or at the bottom of the first page. But I kind of hope the team room URL is up there underneath the title at top of the slide. And I hope to see a lot of folks ask questions so that we can have those conversations. And again, it's going to be very informal. So that's all I have, Chris. Thank you.
Hey, Dennis. One of the things that I wanted to do is kind of one of the things that certainly people can talk about is this initiative and taking a look at it. We're what we basically are looking at here, as I explained to General Carter this morning, is that we consider this a sort of work in progress. A narrative comes from the bottom up more than the top down. So we just kind of created the structure and give the opportunity to all of you out there to take a look at this and make some contributions to its development. So sort of the annual battle rhythm we are looking at here is they're out now. People can take a look at them through the year, through forums like the one that Dennis has. They can actually talk about some of this stuff and say, hey, this doesn't really gain much traction, but this does. And give us some feedback and give us some suggestions so that Dennis and I can reconvene in December every year and somewhere between December and January and sort of revise and update these to reflect more and more of what seems to be bubbling up through the community. And so it can be more useful to the community as time goes on. We don't want it to just kind of die on the vine. And that's kind of our concept. So with that, I'll turn it over to General Goddard. Over to you, sir.
All right. So again, I'm very proud of everything that the Publications Committee is doing. And as you can see, a lot going on, and we hope to continue to get better. But
Sorry,
please reach out and give us your feedback. And we want to incorporate the entire community's thoughts into what we're doing here.
Sorry, I see you
But-
have one question from Colonel Scantlin.
Okay. Fire away.
Thanks for all the information, especially the initiative. Also want to highlight that General George has the Harding Project. It's his initiative for improving professional writing. AUSA supporting the journals. A lot of the Army journals are looking to be revitalized and modernized. And have you guys tied in with that effort or initiative? I know that some CA officers are part of the Harding Project as a broadening assignment.
Yes, so we're very cognizant. We're tracking everything they're doing. Now, they're obviously suffering the same problems that we are about a lack of proper submissions. And when I say proper, no, you can't say, I've got a great idea, here's a tweet on it. We want to make these professional papers, which requires a lot of work. I mean, I've professionally been published, and but we're here to help you with that process. So similarly on Harding Project, they're having their contest. I will say a little bit selfishly, we want to help support that, but we also want the papers to come for our program. The general rule is you cannot publish a paper in two different places. So we support them, and we would like to see, as Colonel Holshek pointed out, if your paper doesn't make the cut for our journal, we'll help you get it published through the Harding Project or Parameters, Small Wars, any of that stuff. Or if the idea is a little bit, a thought leadership that exceeds the bounds of what we're looking for the Civil Affairs Papers contest. But we're tracking all of the Harding Project. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that we try to do, do with the issue papers when we first put them out about 11 or 12 years ago, was we wanted to provide CA professionals the opportunity to hone their skills and to work on their ability. These issue papers, strangely enough, are what we ask for is sort of a slightly academic version of a staff paper, in which you identify an issue, you provide some background on it, you provide some facts, assumptions, all that, and then you have discussion, and then you analyze the the possible solutions, and then you make some recommendations in .mil PFP framework, and each one of those should read like a mission statement, et cetera, et cetera. We do that so that we can help civil affairs professionals hone the kinds of skills, especially as younger officers, that they're going to need in order to be able to do staff integration at higher levels, because that certainly is a gap area for civil affairs, is our ability to be able to work in the MDMP and the decision-making process at higher levels, and the campaign planning process at higher levels. And so this is one of the things we had in mind when we created the Civil Affairs Paper Initiative a few years back.
Yeah. And this is all great preparation for War College and some of the senior level jobs that we hope that people will have someday. I personally have written a memo to the President of the U.S. And got an award for it. So we have the experience here to advise you, and trust us, if you're going to try to reach the upper levels of your career, you need these writing skills.
Sir, thank you for all that, gentlemen. At this point, I'd like to pass it over to Colonel J.P. Lesedry to talk Winfield Scott medallions, and I'll add the link for the medallions in the chat as well.
Hey, thanks, Caroline. Hey, everybody. Hello again. So I don't have a slide for this one. It's not going to take you long, but I'm JP Lesedry. I know a lot of you on this call. I'm chair of the awards committee. I'm also a brigade commander out in the West Coast for one of the K-Pop brigades. So just a lot of you know this, but just a couple of quick updates. Winfield Scott Medallion is our core, we used to call it regimental awards, our core award. It is the means by which we visibly commemorate our lineages across our core, whether it's active, reserve, a few of us in the Guard, but also outside of the Army, Marine Corps, and other services that have, somewhat limited, but also still very much extant civil affairs. Operates very similar to other regimental awards like St. Barbara's Day for artillery, St. Michael's, St. George's, and many, many others. So especially when most of us are in an organization within the Army Reserve, at least, we're unlike active duty, we're not moving around transferring as much. It's very important to have these visible symbols of our affinity to the same organization. And we use the Winfield Scott as a primary mechanism to do that. So generally, we've been doing pretty well on these. A couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we were doing about 40 or 50 awards a year. Our demand has tapped out a lot. We did over 100 in 2024, and we're on track for way more than that in 2025. So much so that we've had to kind of expand to another board member, since it was just one of us. It was me the last couple of years doing these. And it kind of gives you an idea of how much that's gone up. 3 levels of the awards, just as a reminder. The bronze is the main one. Probably like 80% of these should be bronze awards that you're given out. That's like a recognition of your initial entry and service in the regiment. Should be generally given to team leader, team sergeant level, generally captain, staff sergeant, or sergeant first class. Basically successful completion of 1 tenure there. This is supposed to be the one that most people end up having. Silver, it's a much higher award, very, very many fewer silvers and bronzes. That's something consistent with a battalion command or CSM position for at least 1 year. And then on the AGR side, maybe like brigade chops at least, or like a brigade or command S3, something along those lines. We typically don't say you got to be a commander, because that's not available to everybody necessarily, depending on AGR or other career fields. It's not automatic by rank, by the way. You could theoretically earn a silver as a major. It's commensurate with your impact on the regiment, which generally is consistent with rank, but not always. And then gold, which is probably like 5% of the awards that are given. It's not given very commonly. It's strategic level. Generally, it's usually going to be general officer level, but also kind of the more senior leadership, focused colonels, CSM. People who've done brigade command, whether CSM or commander, and like something like a KCOM DCO, KCOM chief of staff. Those are typically, and these awards, by the way, I would say like 98% of them are given to people in 38 series MOSs. We will make exceptions to those for exceptionally long service to the regiment. So for example, CSM out there, who a lot of you know, who's not civil affairs, but he did 2 battalion command CSM tenures, brigade, and is now one of our KCOM CSMs. That's probably neat. That's pretty easy gold right there, even though he's not civil affairs, but that's kind of by exception. We're pushing the awards. They're going very, very well. A little bit patchy. There are certain battalions and brigades out there that are prolific, others that are radio silent. So basically would encourage you guys to give these out at changes of command, like give them out towards the end to the outgoing commander, or dinings in, dinings out. We're looking also into a spousal award. If any of you guys are artillery out there, they have something like Order of Molly Pitcher, something along those lines to commemorate civilians generally spouses who are contributing to the profession, to our core. We're also going to be putting a public listing of awards, so all the names of the awards and levels in the pretty imminent future. So look for that. Submission criteria, actual submission form is available online. So probably virtually all those get done online. If you have any questions or have any trouble doing that, you can reach me either on Global or at awards@civil-affairs.org. If you could put that in the chat, Caroline, that'd be great. Or just give me a call by phone. Last plug, unrelated. That's all I have on awards. Last plug though, we kicked off our Instagram account, I think way too late, but we kicked it out last night. I put it together myself and it's linked in with all of our other accounts. We're already pushing towards 100 people following. So if you haven't, I encourage you to do that. We're putting information about like the great things that Chris and General Goddard were talking about, like the blog, podcast, issue papers, and then events like this roundtable and symposium. It's going to be all over that. I hate to break it to you, nobody under 45 is on Facebook. So Instagram is a great way to get our additional participation from more junior folks who are out there doing the good work on the ground. And I think I'm going to get a last plug on the symposium at the end, so I'll hold off on that. So with that, Caroline, thanks very much for the time, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, JP. So with that, that's going to close out our initials. Let me hit a pause here for a second.